May I request Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya to come on board. Also, Mrs. Aarti Krishnan. I'll just quickly introduce both the eminent speakers. I think Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya requires no introduction. Everybody probably know her very well. She's the chairperson and chief executive officer for Salesforce India. In her role, Arundhati oversees the growth strategy of the company and plays an integral role in defining Salesforce relationship with the ecosystem of customers, partners, and communities across India. Prior to Salesforce, Arundhati Bhattacharya was the first woman chairperson at the State Bank of India. Applause, please. She was credited with ushering in the digital transformation era at the company. Under her leadership, SBI went on to be voted as one of the India's top 3 best places to work in India. With 40 plus years of rich experience in India's financial sectors, working across varied roles in diverse national and international locations, Arundhati has also earned a string of accolades to her name, most notably the world's 100 most powerful women by Forbes, top 50 globally most powerful women in business, and world's 50 greatest leaders list by Fortune. We are fortunate to have her here today. The next panelist is Aarti Krishnan, who is the consulting editor of the Hindu Business Line. She is a cost accountant and an MBA finance by profession, has been closely tracking the Indian financial markets and writing about the entire gamut of financial products and regulations for over 25 years. Joining Hindu Business Line as a research analyst in August 1995, she went on to head its research bureau and was editor of its portfolio section for 7 years. She has moved to a consulting editor role in Business Line from 2014, while continuing to write on the economy, regulations, and markets for both Business Line and the Hindu. She was also a contributor to Value Research and Prime Investor. For her pioneering work in writing on financial services and the economy, she was awarded the Sri Ram Sanlam Award for Excellence in Financial Journalism 3 times. She sought after speaker. Thank you. She is a sought after speaker at investor awareness events and is presently a member of SEBI's Mutual Fund Advisory Committee. So, welcome both the panelists, and I would now hand it over to Aarti Krishnan to take this forward. Thank you, ma'am.
I thank the Indian Institute of Internal Auditors for having me at this event, because it gives me an opportunity to interact with Ms. Bhattacharya, whom I have not had the opportunity to meet in person before. So, when I was given this mandate to do this fireside chat, I was specifically told that all the other sessions will be very technical, so keep it a bit light. So I've tried to fulfill that. The other thing I've done is, I didn't want to include too many gender specific questions, because I find that when women reach a certain level professionally, I mean, it's time to stop asking about work-life balance and things like that. So the questions are mainly pertaining to profession. So women are generally underrepresented in Indian boards and as company chief CEOs and so on. But the BFSI sector in India has been quite an exception, and one can recollect today so many women who are at the helm of banks and financial institutions, whether it is Ms. Shanti Ekambaram, Renuka Ramnath, Kaku Nakate, Padmaja Chandru, and of course you've been the chairperson of the largest bank. So what is it that the BFSI sector is doing right that the other sectors can emulate?
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much to the Association of Internal Auditors for inviting me here. And second, keeping it light, it's very important after lunch. As it is, I'm sure from the morning people are quite exhausted with all kinds of technical details. And after the kind of satisfying lunch that I just had, I'm sure, you know, all of you all would be feeling a little drowsy. So yeah, let's try and keep it light. Regarding what the BFSI sector did right, you know, there was a time when I was chairing SBI, 55% of the banking assets of India at that point of time were headed by women-headed institutions. And actually, in the receptions of the RBI governor, there were, you know, more saris that were seen than suits. And that was a big relief for us. You know, we saw more color in the room. Otherwise, it's all blacks and browns and blues and, you know, a maximum whites, but nothing beyond that. But actually speaking, during my time, there were many more people. And a lot of people have asked us, has this happened? See, in the public sector, there is a separate reason. In the private sector, there are separate reasons. In the public sector, I would say, when I entered the bank, actually the first woman probationer entered the bank 50 years before I became chairman. So it took women 50 years to make that transition from entry point into the C-suite. That's the amount of time it has taken any organization, okay? So other organizations which are younger will obviously not have had that time. That is one. But what happened during our time actually was in 1969, as you know, nationalization took place, bank nationalization. And as a result of bank nationalization, there was a huge impetus from the government to very quickly spread out your bank branches across all the rural areas. And because that needed manpower, the banking system at that time evolved into having these competitive exams like the IAS. And for a person like me who was coming from a general background and I needed a job, the only way, because my father again was in a tier 3 city at that time, he was at SAIL in the steel plant. So we didn't have that many connections with private sector. So to that extent, unless you knew somebody in the private sector, it was difficult to get a job. The only job that you could get purely on merit were those that could be got through the exams, like the IAS and the banking. But in the IAS, you know, you needed knowledge of some subject up to postgraduate level, which was not a language, and I was studying language. So, you know, I didn't have an option, so I appeared for the bank, but so did many other women. And because it was purely a merit-based entry, a lot of women got in because the employment opportunities were very large in the banks. And when you have a very large catchment of women, even if there is a leakage in the pipeline, some people manage to rise to the top. I think that is what happened in the public sector. In the private sector, I think ICICI played a signal role. Because if you see the number of people, number of women they have produced, starting from Lalita Dave to Kalpana Morparia, Chanda Kochar, going on to, Madhavi Bhojpuri, who is currently the SEBI chairman, Vishakha Mule, who's now with Tata Capital. So, you know, lots and lots of women came out from ICICI because ICICI had very women-friendly policies. What they used to do, for instance, when a woman was expecting a child, they would give a temporary posting wherever the woman wanted. If she wanted to be close to her parents, they would give her a temporary posting of a year in that would enable her to stay at her parents' place, you know, and bring up the child up to whatever, 6 months old or whatever. But those were the kinds of policies because of which ICICI didn't lose the women, and that pipeline that they had got, that remained pretty steady, and it remains so. So they had very women-friendly policies. And because, you know, women started having success in the banking area, more and more women got enthused about joining them. And that is what has resulted, you know, in seeing so many women up there. Let me also tell you, because I am now in the IT area, there are lots of women who are heading IT companies in India. So you have people like Sindhu Gangadharan, you have a lot of other women, you know, who are currently heading IT companies. So I think both banking and IT actually have done pretty well where women are concerned. We can do much better, there's no doubt about that. Because if you ask me, you know, in SBI, we were recruiting about 33% women at the recruitment stage, that's at the probationary officer stage. At the senior level, senior management level, that percentage would only become 4. So from 33, it would come down to 4. So you can imagine how much more work needs to be done. So there is a lot of work that still needs to be done. But yeah, overall, I think we have not done too bad a job.
Right. I think it requires a great deal of perseverance for a woman to just stay in her career, because mid-career breaks are so common, right? Yes. So you've been at Salesforce for some time now, and so since it's such a remarkably different company from SBI, are there any management practices at Salesforce that you would have liked to apply at SBI? And I'll ask the opposite question also. Generally, people brand PSUs as inefficient and all that, but the truth is that they have very strong processes, checks and balances, because they're handling taxpayer money, and there's a lot of scrutiny, and so the processes are really strong. So, are there any management practices at SBI that you would have liked to bring to Salesforce?
So, I keep telling all my colleagues, both my ex-colleagues and my current colleagues, that I'm going to write a book when I retire from here, which will be entitled Busting the Private Sector and Public Sector Myths. Because believe me, there are lots and lots of myths. All this nonsense about people in the public sector not working and people in the private sector not working, not true. Okay, some of my colleagues are here. They are very hard workers, but not everybody is. And the fact of the matter is, in the public sector also, similarly, there are some very, very hard workers, but many aren't. Okay. In the public sector, the difference is, if you keep your pen firmly capped and just stay out of trouble, you will be able to continue. In the private sector, if you are not performing, somewhere or the other you get caught, and then you are asked quietly to leave. So the fact of the matter is, in one place you don't have to work to survive. In the other place you have to work to survive. Okay? But if you really want to do well, you have to work in both. If you are interested in having a career that is successful, you cannot get up over there without doing nothing. Okay? Or rather with doing nothing. It's not possible. But if you look at systems and processes and bureaucracy, for instance, in SBI, when I used to go in front of the TV, especially say during demonetization time, I was in front of the TV almost every day. Now, did anybody tell me what to say? Did anybody prepare me? Nothing of the sort. The cameras would come and you would say what you needed to say. Only you had to remember that there is somebody else watching, so you keep out of trouble. If then, especially she is a journalist, so I can say this. Journalists have a way of, quietly slipping a question in. That's really a landmine, so you have to be careful about stepping around them all the time. You have to keep all your wits about you. However, in the private sector, which is where I am, first and foremost, because this is a US listed company that I head in India, unless you are media trained and certified, you cannot speak to the media. You cannot speak outside, definitely not to the media. So I told them, after 4 years of facing all the interviews in TV and newspaper, what certification will you do? They said, no, nothing doing. You won't believe they took 6 months to certify me. Till then I spoke to no media, because they had to be sure that I knew how to handle tough questions. Okay, that's one. The second thing is, and she will know this, wherever I come to speak, my external communications people first ask them that give us the questions, then they will prepare a long brief, and then they will send it to me. Quite a number of times I don't even read them, but that's beside the point. The fact of the matter is, that is their job, so they will brief me. They will brief me. If possible, they try and take some time also in order to run me through all of this. Nowadays, they know that it's of little use, so they let me be. But they do their job. They prepare the brief and everything and send it to me. So saying that, this is very bureaucratic and that is not true at all. Believe me, it's not true. The private sector, well-governed private sector, can be just as bureaucratic as a well-governed public sector. However, the issue in private sector is they are more business oriented. So they are not only process oriented for the sake of process. They look at the process. If it is required in the interest of business, they are willing to see how, staying within the laws and regulations, they can still do something so as to help business grow, so as to help business succeed, and so as to simplify processes. But that does not mean the process isn't there. For instance, one of the audit firms, I don't know if they are here, we have been trying to onboard them as a reseller. That legal discussion has been going on now for the last 9 months. That is in my current organization. Now, had this been SBI, I would have got it done in 9 days. But here it's taking 9 months. So, it applies to both sides in different ways. And I would say that it depends upon the governance of a company and the aims of that company, what they want to achieve, whether in the public or in the private sector, as to how really, you can make a difference. As for things like what I would see over here, which I like. See, one thing, for instance, in this company, again, because it's a US company, we have to all go through what is called an unconscious bias training before we can start taking interviews. Because even women have unconscious bias against women. It's a fact. I have gone through the training myself, so now I know. I would have thought that I am a great supporter of women, okay, and that when I am interviewing people, this would never be one of the things. But now that I've taken the training, I know that I am also subject to certain unconscious biases. So those are the sort of things that these companies do. When they talk about DEI, which is diversity, inclusion, and whatever it is. So the thing is equality, diversity, equality, and inclusion. When they talk about DEI, they actually mean it. It's not just for mouthing words. And in order to mean it, they take necessary steps to make it possible for you to actually perform to those parameters. However, in the public sector, for instance, while we talk a lot about ensuring that there is parity and things like that, do we really do anything about it? No, really not much. If you look at, for instance, even the Indian private sector or public sector, I don't know of any company that does a gender wage parity audit. Have you heard of that in India? I don't think you all have. Salesforce, on the other hand, has a gender pay equality audit every year. Now, this started about 7-8 years back when our founder, Mark Benioff, he's a person who says business is a platform for change. So he has some different ideas about what business should do. So he told his people that, look, I want to have an audit to ensure that there is gender pay parity. And the HR department said that, you are asking us to look under the hood. But if we find a difference, you will have to cough up the cash. Just tell us whether you're willing to do that, because otherwise don't make us do an audit which we will not act upon. And he was so sure that, he had put in the right kind of values and everything. There would be no difference in pay and things like that. He said, I'm 100% certain I'll not have to pay anything. You go ahead and do the audit. So the audit was done, and the company had to pay $5 million in order to bring back gender pay parity. Since then, we have done the audit every year, and we keep buying companies. So, these new companies also go through the audit. Till date, Salesforce has spent $22 million bringing about gender pay parity. That's the kind of pay differentiation that there is. We don't have those things in India. I'd love to see those things happening in India.
Absolutely, yeah. So they look at the pay for the woman with the same qualification and the same role.
At the same role, whether the woman is getting paid less than the man.
Right. And it does happen, is it?
Same roles, it happens. That's what I said. $22 million have been paid out till now. Every year there is a gender pay parity audit. Because as you are giving raises, you'll find you're giving more raise to a man than to a woman. They may have the same talent score.
Right.
They may be performing the same job. Then why are you doing this? It is unconscious bias again. It goes back to that unconscious bias. You have an unconscious bias that the woman probably is giving more priority to the home rather than to office. This is an unconscious bias that is there amongst all of us, men and women regardless. I remember in 2015, by the way, just in order to take care of the issues that women have as a primary caregiver, I had instituted in SBI a 2-year sabbatical for women, which could be taken both for childcare and elderly care. Because in an informal survey I have done in the bank, I found that women were leaving at 3 stages of the career. The first stage was during the childbearing years, which is same across the globe. The second stage, strangely in India, was when the child was between the classes of 10 to 12. 10 to 12 is a very, important period in India, because the child has to not only prepare for the boards, also has to prepare for the entrance exams. And at that point of time, it is the mother's duty to make them drink their Complan and chauffeur them around to all the coaching classes and get them up at 3 in the morning in order to do their homework. Okay? And if the mother doesn't do it, and the child doesn't get it, the mother will feel guilty for life. Even though it doesn't make any difference, but the mother is going to feel guilty. Okay? Or she'll be made to feel guilty. Whether she is guilty or not, she'll be made to feel guilty. So a lot of women give up their careers at that point. The third period where women were giving up their careers, we found, was when, either their parents or parent-in-law were falling sick. See, many a place, the children are actually brought up by the parents or parents-in-law, so that you can continue to be a working woman. Now, when they fall sick, even though you may be having a caretaker at home, you feel very bad about leaving them in their time of need. So, women actually give up their jobs. So, in order to take care of this problem, I had created a 2-year sabbatical that women could take 3 times in their career. Okay. But what happened was, women were taking this and it was saving jobs, but they were still losing seniority. So in order to ensure that that doesn't happen, in 2015 Women's Day, we started a work from home platform for the women. And believe me, even though we started it, even though the facilities were available, it was not successful. Not only because the men felt it was not right, but the women who were being asked to come, they also felt it wasn't right. So, the biases that are there is there in amongst all, because the women who are attending, they were saying, in loko to maja hai, ghar mein baithe baithe, they are doing whatever they want to do, they are probably doing WhatsApp and surfing of the net, they are not being productive. Of course, COVID has taught us that's not the case. Even if you're staying at home, you can be productive. But in 2015, I could not make a success of that platform that I launched. It was lucky though, that platform probably they used during COVID. But the fact of the matter is till COVID came and hit us on the head, we were not willing to believe that anybody can work from home. Okay. So women continued to be discriminated. If you take that 2 years leave, which you need to take in order to save a career of 20 years, you would still lose seniority. So biases, as I said, it's there in men, it's there in women, it's there in all of us. We need to be conscious of it and to actually do something about it.
I can really identify it with what you said, because it was in 2014 when my son was in the 10th standard that I moved from a full-time role to a part-time role, and I became a consultant. And
so you gave him Complan and Bonvita, right?
Absolutely. And when he would come back from school, making sure he had something to eat and all. But I think what it did strike me that I should not scale down my skills. So I took up another job and I tried to have multiple employers at that time. And that kind of jig working actually worked to my advantage, but I realized it's really important. And during COVID, actually, I've seen, my parents also went through a very bad time. And so I've seen many women actually take breaks from work because of this. And after COVID, they've not been able to resume. And if you look at the data also on workforce participation, women's participation has fallen. It has not revived after COVID, whereas men's participation has revived. So I think your point is quite pertinent. And I guess in non-white collar jobs, it's very difficult to have work from home and things like that, right?
The problem about work from home is, we were just discussing it, that it's become work from anywhere. But the other day, one of my colleagues told me that, it's become so easy. I joined Salesforce, I just had to change my computer. I didn't even have to change my connector. So even the connector was the same. He just returned the laptop of the earlier company, got the laptop of Salesforce, and become a Salesforce employee. He's never seen the other company and he has no plans of seeing this company either. So I said, wo sab din ho gaya, now you all have to start coming every once in a while at least. Maybe not every day, but we'd like to see your face once in a while. See, what has happened is this work from anywhere, where it has given, whereas it has been very convenient as well. And especially, places like Bangalore, where we have large centers and traffic is horrible. Same also with Mumbai. They prefer to work from home. But the problem is, we are then not able to create that loyalty to the company. The DNA of the company, what the company is all about, what the company wants to do, how they want you to behave, very difficult to communicate to them if they are not going to come into office at all. So yeah, there are pluses and minuses to both.
Yeah, and the bonds with your co-workers also are not that strong if you're doing it remotely. That's right. Yeah. So coming to an auditing related question, as we are at an auditors conference, now whistleblowing has been much in the news lately. And from a pragmatic point of view, if you look at whistleblowing, most of the whistleblower complaints are actually from a person with vested interests. So it could be a disgruntled employee, or it could be a short seller who's taken a position in the stock. So how should managements actually respond to such allegations? Now, some managements think that if you respond itself, you're giving credence to it. But as somebody from the media, I know that if you don't respond also, then you're tried in the media and then you're damned. So as somebody who's chaired such a big bank and also somebody who's occupied ID positions in very large companies, what do you think should be the kind of response in such situations?
So because, we were obviously overseen by the CVC. The CVC has a very clear rule in this matter. First and foremost, if it is a named complaint, that is the person has put a name over there, then it has to be looked into. You call that person, you talk to that person, ensure that a person who's impartial looks into it. If it is an anonymous or a pseudonymous complaint, and there are material facts stated there, so there are quantitative pieces of facts stated there, then you need to do an inquiry to ensure that the facts are correct or not. If they are correct, you take necessary action. If they are not, you file it. If, however, it is a pseudonymous, anonymous complaint with no quantifiable facts, only allegations. This fellow does favoritism. That fellow does recruits only from his home state. Somebody else does something or the other. Stuff of this sort, which is vague allegations, you simply file. There is no need to do anything. These are the CVC regulations. And accordingly, we used to behave. If there is a quantifiable figure or number, no matter whether the person has a vested interest or not, it is in the interest of the company then to look at it and then to come up with the conclusion as to what is being said is really something where action needs to be taken, or it is something that could have happened in the normal course of business.
So we often hear, I mean, in terms of strengthening the governance framework in India, both the MCA and SEBI vest a lot of powers on the independent directors, the board. Increasingly, whatever measures are coming in are also about separation of chairman from CEO, MD and so on. So as somebody in a board position or as the chair of a very large institution, I was thinking of SBI, like at any time anybody can dig up a past lending decision and say why was this made, and somehow the top management and the chair actually becomes sort of accountable for it. So when you're heading such a mammoth organization where I'm sure dozens of people are reporting to you and thousands are making decisions, how would you keep an eye or a check on what's happening at the lower levels, and how you have to manage by exception, but how do you set up the systems that can notify you when something is wrong?
So basically, we are all human beings. We all have one head and two hands and 24 hours, all right? None of us have any time beyond that. It is impossible, humanly impossible, to keep track of every decision that everybody is making. So the only way that you can actually act is by delegating and ensuring that the people that you're delegating to are the right people. I think one of the biggest reasons why I was successful was because I could get the right people for the right job. If you have the knack of picking the right people who will do the right kind of job, very often you can delegate a lot of your responsibilities to them and they will carry it out very well. It is only by delegation that you can manage this. If you try to manage it all yourself, either you will not manage or you will be able to do very little work. Because everything will have to come to you, everything is centralized, nothing will move without your say-so, and every time you're giving a yes, you have to go through reams and reams of paper. So it is just not feasible. The only way you do it is to put trusted people, people who are capable in the right kind of jobs, and then your burden becomes a little less. Having said that, if you still have a bullet written over here, it's going to catch you, no matter where you are. So at some point of time, you surrender. You say, "Je hona hai, hone do." Because in any case, your neck is already in the guillotine. Whether the blade drops or not, only God will decide. There's no point in thinking about it. You overthink it, you will not be able to do anything. You'll be paralyzed. So, you accept that and move on. That's the only way this can be done.
Right. I've read in one of your interviews that digital adoption is very close to your heart, and India has definitely worked wonders on the score in terms of opening Jan Dhan accounts, achieving such high bank account penetration, and then Aadhaar identification, which has made onboarding on financial products so easy, and then you have UPI adoption. So definitely adoption is picking up, because you're seeing everybody from the Istri wala to the driver actually accepting UPI. But on the other hand, if you look at the RBI ombudsman reports, etc., you do see that the incidence of cyber crime and phishing, wishing, all sorts of scams, that is really going up. So how prepared is our law enforcement system to actually deal with this, and are consumers well protected as they adopt digitally, especially outside the cities, etc.?
So, one thing I must say, that if you look at public digital infrastructure, the first public digital infrastructure of real note was the World Wide Web. Okay. After that, it was the GPS. Both of them were developed by the American government for the American army, and then made open to the rest of the world to use. But after that, public digital infrastructure has only been created in India. So whether it be the UIDAI, which is the Aadhaar, or it be UPI, or it be DigiLocker, or it be Arogya Setu, or it be CoWIN, you name it, there are 12 pieces to the India digital stack. All of this has been created as public digital infrastructure, and then the private players have been allowed to play on it. So on the UPI platform, you have GPay, you have PayU, you have everybody playing on it. They are private players. Okay. Just as on the internet, there are so many private players. So the fact of the matter is, India is an exceptional country in having created this digital infrastructure. And this digital infrastructure has really and truly empowered people. Because if you remember the earlier days, however much you can try, creating brick and mortar structures in 600,000 villages is not easy, just not feasible. So as a result, a laborer would have to spend half a day going to the bank in order to deposit his money or withdraw his money, and therefore lose half a day's livelihood. Who wants to lose half a day's livelihood? And as a result, they were all in cash. Now, with the digital infrastructure, what has happened is, they don't need to go to a bank branch anymore. First of all, they can ask payment by QR code, automatically it goes to the bank. And then again, with their GPay or with their Paytm or PayU, they themselves can use that cash to make payment. So nobody has to go to the bank, and yet, they don't have to keep cash, which in any way is a very insecure way of keeping things. I used to know a girl, she used to come and do my hair and all at home, because I didn't get time to go to these salons or whatever. So this girl used to tell me that every night, whatever I earn throughout the day, on the way back, there is a grocery shop wala. So I go to him and he takes my money and deposits it into the account through his micro ATM. He is also a business correspondent. Because if I go home, my son, who has now grown older, he simply beats me up and takes away my money. So I don't take it home. I take only 10-15 rupees, because if he gets nothing, he'll beat me more. So I take 10-15 rupees, and that's the state of the, our people in India. So they actually deposit the money before they go home on a daily basis. And she was telling me, it's such a blessing this is there. Because if this had not been there, I would have kept losing my money. Whatever I take home, it gets taken away from me. So I always deposit on the way home, and I go home with 10-15 whatever. Jo dena hai de do, and that's enough. So, it has really and truly empowered a lot of people. Now, whatever, advances we have, it has a positive and a negative side. It's just like nuclear reaction. It can be used for peace, it can be weaponized. So, phishing, etc. is like that. If you have a home, unless you put a lock on it, somebody is going to come and steal your stuff. As simple as that. I think what is required is constant literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy. This is something that has to be constantly done. Because I know, for instance, there's one gentleman who retired as a GM of a public sector unit. a general manager. Okay, so obviously he is a well-read, well-educated person. You can't believe at 10 in the night he calls me and he says, you know, I think I have lost some money to these cyber criminals. So I said, kya hua? He said, no, he gave me a big long story, and then he said, then OTPs kept coming to me and they kept asking for the OTP. I have shared 5 of them. I was amazed, you know, every OTP says do not share with anybody. Every one of them. I said, you can read English, no? If every OTP says that and you have not shared 1, you have shared 5. And now you are calling me after sharing 5. Because after sharing 5, it struck him that something must be wrong. Can you imagine? So the fact of the matter is, you know, digital literacy means it is up to us to create this literacy amongst all of us. The various ways that, you know, people can do it. And not only that, even we who are supposed to be IT professionals, every once in a while we get these wishing mails, you know, just to check whether we are on our guard or not. The first time I remember I got it in Salesforce, I clicked on the link and got a big red warning saying, go and do your courses all over again. Okay, so from then on I have been very careful. First, you know, I have a contact at the, at the technical center. I send the mail to them and tell them, look at it, whether it's a wishing mail. If they tell me it isn't, only then I click, otherwise I don't. But it's happened to me as well. So the fact is, you have to be very much on your guard when you are doing these things. There is no other way to it. But you know, this is a evolution that is here to stay. It's not going to go away. Nobody is going to go back into a world which is not digital. So the only way to handle this is to learn how to do it and to be on our guard.
But how easy is it to give complaints, etc., when something goes wrong?
No, it's very easy.
The police?
Yeah, it's very easy. See, normally today the banks will replenish the money also very quickly. But at the end of the day, you also have to understand that if you are yourself being careless, and then there is a lot of thing, then, you know, there is obviously some amount of, you know, what should I say, some amount of difficulties that you have to go through. Because, yeah, of course, you know, there is always a feeling of fear, so much of money has gone away, when will it come back, what would be the other things. So it is a stressful situation, I'm not saying it isn't. And especially as we age, it becomes more stressful, because you're not able to keep such, you know, tight control of everything. But the fact of the matter is, this is here to stay, we've got to deal with it, we've got to keep ourselves updated. And for all companies, etc., also that are doing it, it's important to give their own employees digital literacy. It's very important.
Yeah, right now there's a mail doing the rounds that your bank wants to do re-KYC.
All nonsense. Please be very, very careful. Not only that, mind you, don't go on Google and check for your branch's number. Bank branch number, if you Google it, it will take you to a site which will give you a wrong phone number, and when you connect with them, they will simply clean out your bank account. So be very careful about what you are taking from the net and how you are approaching your bank. If possible, go get to your branch once and get the phone numbers and everything and keep it in a safe place. So, you know, keeping your mobile number in a safe place, keeping your credit card numbers in a safe place, keeping the phone number which will block your cards, you know, in as part of your thing. These are all things we should learn to do.
So layoffs are much in the news, and US tech companies have this hire and fire culture. They hire at very high compensation, they offer you all kinds of benefits, but they also fire you very quickly in case of adversity or non-performance. So you're working in a US tech company now, and you've come from the diametric opposite culture like SBI, where in public sector you have complete job security through your career. So which do you find to be the better system between the two?
See, indiscriminate firing is never good. Okay, but let me tell you, there is very rarely indiscriminate firing. Having said that, can we avoid firing altogether? I don't think that is very healthy either. As I said, if you don't have some performance metrics, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? See, in a public sector, what happens, you realize whether you are performing or you are not performing, you are all going to get the same, you know, rewards. If that is the case, then unless you are self-motivated, you will not perform at all. Which is not how an an organization should be. In a public sector, what happens, 40% people actually perform. 60% feel they don't need to, and nothing happens to them. Now, that is not healthy. That is definitely not healthy, and it should not be encouraged. In the private sector, yes, sometimes, firings happen not only because there is indiscriminate hiring, but there could be other pressures, shareholder pressures, need to make more profits, so all of those are there. So, while that is not something that I can principally sort of support, but the fact of the matter is if it's on basis of performance, then I would support that. Because again, it is not that people are just fired. There are ways of doing it. So you first go through a informal counseling, okay? You are given somebody who will buddy you or mentor you in order to take you through whatever you are not able to do. Then you will have a formal performance improvement plan that actually takes you through coaching, that gives you certain interim milestones. And if after all of this you are still not able to perform, then you are asked to leave. So that I think is absolutely a fair way of doing things, because sometimes people come into a particular job, they may not be liking doing it. Maybe they will do much better if they do something else. So there's no point in keeping them on over there just because they've entered once. And then, bearing the non-performance for ever so.
I think we are short of time, so just one last question. So I find that social media is a real time sink. So once you start on some work in the morning and then you start to go to Twitter and you browse your WhatsApp, it just absorbs your time like anything. And somebody like me can afford to waste time, but with your tight schedule and kind of responsibilities, how do you balance you have to be on social media because you have to be on top of what's happening. At the same time, you have to manage your schedule. So how do you really manage this?
So actually speaking, I'm not very much on social media. That's the first thing. I have a Facebook page which I never ever visit. I'm not on Insta or on Twitter. I have a LinkedIn page because that's professionally required. And I do get some help from my people in order to keep my LinkedIn page up to date. But even then, even without all of this, WhatsApp itself is like a, sometimes I feel I'm sitting under the Niagara Falls and there is a whole horde of messages simply descending on me. So what I have done is more or less most of the social groups, I am a silent, participant in that. I just scroll and close and that's it. But some of them, of course, I have to respond. But I have found ways of doing it. For instance, messages on holidays. The problem is earlier people used to only message you on important holidays. Now they message you on everything, starting from Akshaya Tritiya to, Govardhan Jayanti to whatever you have. Some of them I have never even heard of in my life. We get, messages greeting us on those. Now, those I normally don't respond, but for New Year or Diwali or something, I used to find something very difficult. That is, you have, say, 50 messages to respond. Now, you respond to the first one, then you have to again scroll down to the message that you haven't responded to. So, the scrolling up and down became a lot of problem. So, one of these youngsters, I asked them, "Kaise karte ho bhai?" This is becoming impossible for me. He said, "Madam, aapko to kuch aata wata nahi hai." There are those three small, blue lines on the next to your search bar. You just press that. If you press that, all your 100 messages will come on top and will stay on top. So you won't have to scroll anymore. Now, you want to do a Deepavali message, one for your family, one for your friends, one for your colleagues. 3 message, you go to text replace, you write that, and put some short letters, like maybe family can be XXX, colleagues can be YYY, friends can be ZZZ, whatever you want. You put the text replace, and then you go to the message, just put that XXX, it will come and you send it off. Frankly speaking, believe me, that guy was a lifesaver for me. Now 500 messages, I can do it in 30 minutes flat. And everybody is highly impressed that this woman, how does she respond to all of us personally? They don't know that some youngster has taught me how to do it. Huh? So I think the only way to prevent this time sink is to ask your child at home, how the hell do you do it, and you will learn from them. They know all the tricks, which we don't.
I think I'm doing what you used to do, reply to each message, but I learned these shortcuts.
Right. So do that.
Thank you so much, Arundhati. It was a great conversation. I hope the audience enjoyed it too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, I request you to be seated for a minute, please. Thank you so much, Aarti, Krishnan, first of all, because the session is as good as the moderator is. Thank you so much for generating all those interactive questions that are very relevant for the topic that we are having today. And about you, Arundhati ma'am, as we all listen to you gratifiedly, it's not just me. I think the entire crowd today enjoyed every bit of the conversation that we had. There were resonating smiles, relatable examples, and the power of drinking Complan. I think that's not just for women and even for most of the dads here, because they are doing a pick-up drop services for their respective children. So that was much relatable. You spoke about very powerful concepts today, starting with recognizing the unconscious bias and taking control of ourselves. And most importantly, digital literacy. How can I even ignore that for that matter? If not, I'm sure 90% of us would have been winning a lottery every day. A message that says won 20 crores, 30 crores that I would have not even heard in my entire lifetime. So definitely those were relatable, important, and also thank you so much for keeping us alive throughout the sessions with all those relatable jokes. Thank you very much. As a token of honor, I'm going to request Uma ma'am, our president of IIA India, to give you a moment of honor. I request Krishnan Venugopal, fondly called as KV, Secretary of IIA India, to come over and give a memento to Aarti Krishnan.
I just want to add one line to what ma'am has been talking. When she really opened the topic, and the first line was on work-life balance. So I was wondering, we have still only the diversity ratio is very poor, even here today in this conference. So I was really wondering how the work-life balance is the right thing today for the crowd. But you have really won the hearts of the other diversity group. Hats off to you, ma'am. Really superb. So we ladies are able to do even that much better, probably, won the hearts of the other gender. Great. Thank you, ma'am.
Requesting KBS Manian, past president of IIA Met.